Welcome, Travis. Frank, thanks for being here.
I didn't know.
Hello.
So it seems like everybody wants an experience post-pandemic. It's all everybody seems to be talking about. And obviously tours and activities is pivotal to that. What is fundamentally wrong with tours and activities that we haven't cracked it yet? Travis, start with you.
I feel the big thing is it's the fragmentation, and there's so many different types of tours and travel styles and different things that, at least with a hotel, there's rooms and different types, and that's it's quite easy to categorize and actually map and actually be able to sell. And so with a tour, you can get a 7-day trip to Japan, you can have a river cruise, you can have a polar experience. So there's all these different types of things, and to actually put them into a standardized way is extremely difficult. And also, the tour operators traditionally haven't been the fastest to move with technology. So I think it's a combination of the fragmentation, the complexity of it, and actually the technology side. Yeah.
And when you say tour operators, you mean the actual operators of the tours as opposed to a tour operator like TUI?
Correct, yeah. So there's different, so the tour
okay.
operators, it could be a DMC, or it could be someone like Intrepid or Contiki or G Adventures. So.
Do you want to add to that?
Yeah, sure. But I want to give it also a little bit different perspective, because I think what is fundamentally right with tours is that tours is the third biggest segment in travel after hotels and flights. Yeah. So therefore, we have roughly 300 billion euros of pre-pandemic revenue in tours. It was the fastest growing sector of the industry, faster growing than all other types. And I think also tours is something, when we talk about travel, where we really, really connect people. So this is, I think, when we talked here also about sustainability, when we talk about how can we bring people together, that's what actually crystallizes in tours. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think from a tour operator perspective, of course, tours and activities was always more kind of an add-on to the kind of the sun and beach, to say, well, you can extend that or you can enrich that. And I think that's very much where we played it from the past, and only recently we started to develop it as an own kind of category. And then everything Travis was talking about, the fragmentation, the low level of digitalization, actually that comes then into play. And I think that's why we are talking about transforming of tours.
Okay. I mean, we've seen all this digital acceleration over the course of the pandemic. Why, for example, couldn't tours and activities be treated like, SKUs on a supermarket shelf? Why aren't we doing something like that?
Well, it can be. I think that's the goal. But also, I think it's very hard to just say one SKU for a 23-day polar Antarctic experience. How can you actually just put that into one SKU? So I think it's how do you actually add the context around what's included in that. What's the amazing local experiences? You're going out on a dinghy and seeing penguins, and how do you actually quantify that into a single SKU? And I think that's the challenge of it, really.
And are you including in that the description, the reviews, the photos, all of that side of things?
Yep.
Okay.
So it's absolutely everything too.
Price,
videos
availability.
as well, price, the different cabin levels. So sometimes there's above deck, below deck, there's different prices, and all that has to be in real time. So there's a lot of different complexity in that regard.
Because it does seem to me as if we have a lot of technology that helps with tours and activities, automation and distribution, but there's still lots of gaps. Obviously, we have mobile, we have QR codes, we have lots of things that we can do. And the pandemic, we did see the growth of contactless technologies, and yet we're still kind of holding us back. And do you think it's purely down to the complexity of all of those things?
I think when you decompose a tour, then it composes out of very different components. One are very well known and are digitalized, and then I think when you look about the experience, that's of course also something we can sometimes shelve it in that perspective. So you can, but then there is a whole thing when you talk about guides, and then it gets very personal. So it's a kind of the social component which comes to that play. And I think that is something which, from my perspective, needs to be developed. Yeah? And we work in TUI on that, and we call it then TUI collections, actually, where we actually combine, so to speak, the kind of the experience, the Eiffel Tower, with a kind of a guide and some elements of a personal experience. And I think that's then making the difference. That's actually providing a level of differentiation, but it depends very much then on the people, it depends on the personality, on what you want to experience. And I think to find the right form for that going forward will be the task for the next couple of years, to develop that kind of social element of that, because it's about connecting people, and that's something very, very personal, and it's far away from being standard, and you see that in all your communication.
Okay. I want to talk about TUI and your kind of big bet on amusement for a minute. I think it's something like 45% of your bookings are now via digital channels, and that's quite a big growth from about 2% a few years ago. So, you know, what's going to tip the scale further? You know, what's going to be 50%, 60%, 70% via digital?
Yeah, so I think for us it was really key actually to provide these capabilities. Yeah, so therefore to be able to also with the acquisition of Amusement to build that kind of two-sided platform. On the one side, to make it easy actually for all kind of experience for the fragmented markets to onboard, to make it available, to work with partners together, actually to bring their experiences to the platform, and then on the other side to sell it. And to sell it, we have two, I think, currently major sales channels, and the one is, of course, together with the tour operators. Yeah, we have 60–70% of the people who are actually going on holidays, they have the TUI app, so therefore they can actually easily then book early the tours, and that's actually very different of how tours are typically booked and activities, because most of them in destination are booked more than 60% 1–2 days before actually the activity takes place. So therefore this is a quite ad hoc business. Of course, I think from all the planning, from all the quality perspective, it makes a big, big difference if we have a little bit more time in advance, and also for our customer, the people who are on a journey. Of course, on the one side, in terms of deciding earlier to plan the journey, but to give them also the flexibility in terms of changing that, but it gives you a kind of a better value to the holiday. So therefore, I think that has driven very much actually the move from actually selling elements via the reps to sell them online, to sell them digital in that way. But there is still this opportunity, and I think also the more complex stuff where it's getting more personal, there is still the opportunity to also take a kind of a personal sale in the destination, so this combination. Second big element in terms of growing that is the B2B functionality which we are providing, so that we open up our experience to third parties. So we are working here with some bigger OTAs together, and they are a good multiplier of these products. They are really good partners in terms of developing that and also helping us to attract suppliers of tours and activities to come on our platform, because that gives them the kind of the necessary reach. And of course, we are also developing some kind of B2C, but this is, I would say, this is the kind of the third priority in terms of the selling directly, because of the distribution cost. And then, of course, it gives you access to other kind of people, and it's also an upselling opportunity for other stuff. But I think the priorities are, of course, it's the vast majority of TUI folks where we can market to our B2B partnerships and B2C.
Do you think there's advice that you could give to Travis, given that he's going down the route at the moment of distribution via Flight Centre, and you already distribute via travel agents? What advice could you give to Travis on that?
No, I think we know each other for quite some time, yeah. And I think what he and TourRadar does really extremely well is actually how to manage how to manage a tour and how to customize it for his customers. And I think that's something where when you look on the other side in terms of seeing just tours and activities as an add-on, I think he has really a kind of a fantastic starting position.
Well, similarly, Travis, you've you've been in multi-day tours for a long time, and Frank now wants to get into multi-day tours with his agreement with Nazasa for the development of a platform. So what could you tell him and what you could advise him about going down the multi-tours route, perhaps avoiding some mistakes from the early days?
No, I think the big thing is actually how do you get it simplified? I think that's the absolute challenge, and why the adoption of OTAs hasn't yet been there, like in terms of multi-day. It hasn't been a product that has been taken on because, again, the complexity. So if it can be simplified, I mean, the deal with Flight Centre is we're providing one API. They're basically having 18 of their best partners or their preferred partners actually building into our APIs, because we have them all integrated in our platform, and how do you actually just make that simple for the end user, for B2B. So, and I think the real-time pricing, the bookability, instant book is a massive one. I think that's something really underestimated in the multi-day sector. It's traditionally, you click, you book, and then hope and wait for 24 hours or 48 hours, and then actually a booking confirmation comes through. 60% of our inventory is instantly bookable. And I think that's really part of the drive we need to be pushing the tour operators to say, have it instantly bookable, make sure the pricing is right for children, for adults, for different cabin types, all these things. So it's a beast to try and get into, but once you start to get down and break it down at the foundational level, it can be done. So, yeah.
What would you both say are the kind of gaps going forward, the opportunities in tours and activities? Our friend Alex Brainbridge, who always talks about the massive opportunity in autonomous going forward. Perhaps there's an opportunity in Metaverse, or is that too kind of pie in the sky right now? What are you seeing as the opportunities going forward? Kick us off, Frank.
Yeah, so of course, I think Metaverse is a really, really exciting topic. Yeah, and when I then think about in terms of where our key partners are, yeah, I think these are two different worlds. Yeah, and I think I found it interesting when Omri talked about here about his kids playing Fortnite here before the break. Yeah, I'm sometimes wondering what is actually the path in that kind of direction. Is it more coming from the games perspective, because there you really live in a kind of a digital world, yeah, and you can make it as nice and beautiful as it is. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so therefore, I think our world, or what we want, is in that sense to say, well, connect with real people and using tours for that. And I think when we currently look into what happens in the digital world or in these kind of metaverse social environments, is that the personalities, yeah, are sometimes not matching with the real personalities. Yeah, and so therefore I think that's a kind of a different experience. Yeah, and I'm not saying that this will not evolve. It will evolve and it will become big. But I think when we look at where we are overall from a global perspective, I think we need people who understand each other better than they currently do. Yeah, and my hope was always that travel could actually play a kind of a key role in that. Yeah, and so therefore I think for us, when we do tours, when we develop, so to speak, our products, we have that kind of component around sustainability in it, which I think is important. And when we talk about purpose, yeah, which also actually delivers a purpose in that perspective in bringing cultures together. And so therefore, that's always where I say, well, this is for me, I don't say in German, you say it's a Königsklasse. Yeah, so that's really where the art of travel comes to the highest. Yeah, and therefore, it's also most difficult in terms of how to bring that further. But I think the price, if you're able to help people actually to enhance their kind of simple sun and beach travel with these kind of components, yeah, I think that's when we really on the one side make happy people, because that's long-lasting memories for them. It can be life-changing, and we know that also from our engagement in the destinations, especially when Europeans are traveling long distance. For many destinations, travel is the only way in terms of getting significant income, of helping themselves to transform, to evolve as a society. And from my perspective, that's the most sustainable way in terms of doing that.
I'll come back to that in a sec, but just wanted to ask Travis if he sees kind of more opportunities. Obviously, you've got B2B now. What are you looking at next?
So in terms of opportunities, actually, can I just add one point to this? I think, so autonomous driving and all that kind of stuff, and Metaverse, great. There's still some simple things that need to be done. I feel the narrative and story of tours, so multi-day tours, has not been told well. I think we've got a legacy of following an umbrella around, is the perception of a group tour. And the way we look at it is they're organized adventures. So it's a package where everything's organized for you, it's seamless. So I think if we can somehow crack that narrative better and tie in sustainability also, because the tours and the adventures that are being done, typically they're being run by locals. So the guides are local, you're eating in local places, and I think that narrative has not been told well enough. And I think we've got to get it to a point where it gets put into the consideration set of a normal traveler. Because you look at Airbnb, you look at all the different ways of traveling, how can we get organized adventures as being a considered item in there rather than just going, oh, a tour, I never want to do a tour.
Do you want it as a category on booking.com? Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
It
should be there because it's something, it's a different style of travel in today's world. Dean mentioned it before about safety. Safety is a huge aspect of a tour. 70% of the people who book tours are female. They want to travel with a group, they want to have that safety aspect. So how do we actually get that narrative better? And I think that will actually change people's thoughts and actually consider booking this more. So that's where I see, Metaverse and all that kind of stuff eventually.
Yeah.
But I think we've got some basics to get right first. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Equally, how do we get the narrative around sustainability right? Because that's getting pretty complex already. It's almost as if every week you hear another consumer mark, standard, whatever, follow this one, buy into that one. Now, how do we get the sustainability narrative right around tours and activities?
I think when we talk about sustainability, we have these ESG, and I would say we discuss 90% E.
Yep.
Yeah, but I think when you look at the kind of the developed countries, S and G are a prerequisite to get E. Yeah, and so therefore, I think we should not forget, in terms of developing that in a kind of a consistent manner forward, in terms of enabling, I think, the development and also enabling, so to speak, the kind of the decarbonization. I think these kind of two things, they need to go hand in hand in that perspective. And I think on the other side, of course, from a digitalization perspective, that's something where we need to give choices to the consumer, in that perspective, and make it transparent in terms of what are the kind of the alternatives. And that's where I think this is. You could of course always say that's the role of the platform, but I think it's much more the role of those who are actually developing the experience, who are providing the experience. And in TUI, what we have done is, together with the Greek government, where we have created our co-lab in Road, where we actually completely want to transform a destination together with all partners. So that means with the government, with the, they will, for example, shut off, they had a big power plant on the island, so it will be shut off. They will actually power the island by renewable energy. We will work with all hotels here to find different ways in terms of managing the hotel. And that's something, I think it's a microcosmos. Do we save the world with roads? Maybe not, but we can actually potentially provide a kind of a blueprint in terms of what works, in terms of how economically it works, and how we can also make it economically, from all the components, but also from an experience perspective in terms of how do we actually move that forward. And I think that's something which I think is key, and we will also see if we market that then towards our travelers, if that is something which actually excites them and which they want to support also with their time, because at the end of the day, what we mainly get from our customers is their time. They have their very, very precious time and say, okay, I want to spend that with you, I want to spend that with the destination, with the people there, and that's super precious, and I think we need to think about it in terms of making the most out of them for them.
Okay. Lots of debate and discussion at the moment about how much operators of tours work with OTAs, whether they do a good job for them. What's your view, Travis?
Well, not many tour operators that we work with actually work with the OTAs, and that comes down to we have 2,500 operators, we have around 350 individual connections, and every single one takes time. And so I don't think there has been yet the ability for an OTA to sort of say, okay, how can I mop all this up at once?
Yeah.
And they haven't been sure about the economics of it. Yeah, high basket sizes, but all the customer contact, all that kind of stuff, how much work is involved. So I think there's been a lot of education that's still needed to get there. It is happening. We just launched with lastminute.com last week. So they're actually taken our white label, and so that's one of the first big ones that we've got. But I think it's just how can we have more of this product digitized in a simplistic way for these OTAs to consume, and then actually be able to sell it on, and also know how to sell it.
Yeah.
And I think that's, again, back to the narrative. Why do you take an adventure or a tour? What's the reason for that? And I think that still needs to be really improved to be able to do that and get the OTAs actually taking it mainstream. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. The OTAs may not quite have worked out the economics of it yet, and we've seen lots of kind of ups and downs, but I mean, investors still see huge potential. Civitatis got 100 million euro, Head-Up got 30 million euro. Is this going to continue to be seen as attractive as a sector?
I feel so. I do truly think this is kind of one of the last areas to be digitized. Obviously, Get Your Guide and Klook and Musement and everyone were the first movers in the activity side. But now in the multi-day space, it is kind of that area. It is a $200 billion market, and it hasn't yet been digitized. 20% is only online, 80% is offline. Lots of travel agents still sell this. So how do you actually bring that online, or how do you facilitate the travel agents to do this? So I really do think even from the inbound interest from a lot of PE firms recently, for us, it's been more than ever. So I think it's starting to actually, the awareness of this category is starting to finally kind of be put in the spotlight. So, yeah.
Seeing something similar on that vein?
I completely agree. Yeah, I think it's not to add, because you also mentioned it partly, I think it's also the digitalization of all the kind of the experiences behind who actually make then the bigger piece actually possible. But it's the next, I think it's the next thing, from a digitalization, from a transforming perspective, which happens, and you see how much money flows into that. Yeah. And we are investing. I think our tour operator competitors are investing in that space. Startups are investing. Funding is flowing into that space. So therefore, I think the prerequisite in that perspective are there. Yeah. And I think it's about time to help also to find then the right formats also in that perspective, to make it easy for those who are providing the experiences in terms of how to digitalize that, of how to make it available, maybe via multiple platforms at the end of the day, and then also the customers to have also the kind of the confidence, okay, I can also book it through that. And of course, I think all the fine print is something quite relevant, because I think things are changing. Yeah, and when we just look into what happens actually these days with flight changes and stuff like that. So therefore, if you self-compose your kind of tour, and then you have significant changes 2-3 days, yeah, then you need, of course, we have the flexibility to rebook all your kind of experiences. Yeah, that's something which goes on the finger press. Yeah, so you say, so my flight is 3 times later, so can you move that? But of course, if there are some things which which is bound to a certain day, then this is of course over. And it might also change the reason for, do I really need to go there? And I think that's something which makes it in that perspective, on the one side, super complex, but also really rewarding in terms of if we have the ability actually to crack that and to make it easily accessible for our travelers.
I'm afraid we have to wrap it up there. Travis, Frank, thank you very much.
Thanks, Linda.
Thank you so much, Linda.
Thanks, Frank.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.